There's a prison in the middle of nowhere, Colorado, that most Americans have never even heard of. No windows to the outside world, no yard time with other inmates, no chance, not once, of anyone ever busting out. They call it the Alcatraz of the Rockies. The government calls it ADX Florence. And the guy who used to run the place, a former warden who spent 20 years in the federal prison system, didn't sugarcoat it. He flat out said it's basically a tomb, a place where people go to disappear for the rest of their lives. This is where the US government sends the worst of the worst. We're talking terrorists, mob bosses, cartel kingpins, serial killers, guys so dangerous or so escape-happy that regular maximum security prisons couldn't hold them. So how bad is it really? Stick around, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand why nobody, and I mean nobody, has ever walked out of ADX Florence on their own terms. Okay, so let's rewind for a sec. Back to 1983, there's this federal prison in Marion, Illinois, and two corrections officers get murdered in the same day by members of the Aryan Brotherhood. That was the moment everything changed for the federal prison system. The guy running the Bureau of Prisons at the time, Norman Carlson, basically said, "Enough." He put that entire prison on lockdown. Inmates stuck in their cells 23 hours a day, barely any phone calls, barely any visitors. That lockdown lasted over 20 years. But here's the thing. Marion was never actually designed to be a supermax. It was a regular prison that got turned into one out of necessity. So the Bureau of Prisons decided, all right, let's build a facility from scratch that's designed for this from day one. That's where ADX Florence comes in. Cost about $60 million to build, and it opened its doors in November of 1994. Now, if you're picturing some giant scary fortress on a hill, that's not quite it. A DX sits in the high desert of Colorado, about 100 miles south of Denver, in a tiny town most people drive right past without even realizing what's there. It's actually just one part of a bigger federal prison complex. There's 4 different prisons on that same property, holding over 2,600 inmates total. But ADX is the crown jewel, so to speak. It's the only prison in the entire United States with a supermax designation. And the security around this place is no joke. 12-foot razor wire fences, gun towers, motion detectors, pressure pads in the ground, attack dogs, sharpshooters on standby. Every single door, and there's over 1,400 of them, is remote controlled. Nobody's just walking out of there. In over 30 years, not a single person has ever escaped. So what's it actually like being locked up in there day to day? Inmates spend roughly 23 hours a day locked in their cell, alone. We're talking a concrete room with a poured concrete bed, a shower with a timer on it so you can't stay in there too long, and a tiny window, but it's angled in a way where you literally cannot see anything except sky. No trees, no buildings, nothing that tells you where you are. For that one remaining hour a day, inmates might get to walk around a small solitary exercise pen, alone obviously, before going right back inside. A lot of these guys don't have any contact with other prisoners at all. Some go years, even over a decade, without seeing another human being face to face who isn't a guard. This is part of why ADX has ended up in so many lawsuits over the years. Back in 2012, a group of prisoners actually filed a class action lawsuit claiming the facility wasn't providing basic mental health treatment for inmates who were seriously struggling. That case ended up getting settled a few years later. Alright, now for the part everyone actually clicks on this video for: who's locked up in there. You've got Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, responsible for a bombing campaign that spanned almost 2 decades and set off one of the biggest manhunts in FBI history. You've got Timothy McVeigh's old partner, Terry Nichols, tied to the Oklahoma City bombing, one of the deadliest acts of domestic terrorism in American history. You've got Zacarias Moussaoui, connected to the 9/11 attacks, and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, the surviving Boston Marathon bomber. International terrorism? Ramzi Youssef is in there too, the guy behind the first World Trade Center bombing back in 1993. And it's not just terrorists. You've got major organized crime figures like Aryan Brotherhood leadership and Lucchese crime family bosses. You've even got El Chapo. Yeah, that El Chapo, the Sinaloa cartel kingpin whose escapes from Mexican prisons made international headlines, now sitting in a concrete box in rural Colorado with basically zero chance of ever getting out. There's also inmates with far less famous reputations, but honestly just as disturbing. Guys convicted of serial murders, including at least one former doctor who was convicted of poisoning his own patients. Bottom line, if you end up at ADX, it's usually because somewhere along the way somebody decided you were too dangerous, too high profile, or too much of an escape risk for anywhere else. Here's where it gets kind of unsettling to think about. Human beings, generally speaking, are not built for this kind of isolation. Multiple mental health experts have pointed out that extended solitary confinement, especially the kind of near-total isolation you get at ADX, can cause serious psychological damage. We're talking anxiety, paranoia, hallucinations in some extreme cases. One inmate who spent close to 30 years, that's over 10,000 days, in solitary confinement at ADX, became something of a case study for just how extreme this facility's conditions really are. And that's part of why this place stays controversial. Critics argue it's basically a form of psychological punishment on top of the original prison sentence. Defenders argue that when you're dealing with people this dangerous, people who've killed guards, run criminal empires from behind bars, or planned attacks that killed dozens or even thousands of people, extreme measures are the only way to keep everyone else safe. There's no easy answer here. Both sides have a point, and that tension is honestly a big part of why ADX keeps popping up in documentaries, articles, and, videos just like this one. A few wild details before we wrap up. At one point, prison officials reportedly banned inmates from having copies of a former US president's books, saying they were considered potentially sensitive from a national security standpoint. There was also an incident involving a member of the prison's own elite tactical response team getting caught stealing and selling security equipment on the black market, which, if you think about it, is a pretty wild irony for a prison built around the idea of total control. And despite everything, the fences, the towers, the pressure pads, the guards, there have still been claims over the years about unauthorized contact happening inside the walls, leading to lawsuits and internal investigations. Even a place designed to be escape-proof and airtight isn't necessarily as buttoned up on the inside as the outside world assumes. At the end of the day, ADX Florence isn't just a prison, it's basically the final stop for the people the American justice system considers too dangerous for anywhere else. Terrorists, cartel bosses, serial killers, mob leadership, people who, in a lot of cases, will spend every single remaining day of their lives in a concrete room with a view of nothing but sky. No escapes in over 30 years, no second chances, just walls, silence, and time. Whether you think that's justice or something darker, that's really up to you to decide. If you liked this one, make sure you're subscribed, because we've got a lot more inside the walls stories coming your way.